Firstly, what really convinced you to join Zomato?
I think early days when I joined, I was one of the first salespeople for Zomato. And then I met Pankaj, who was the co-founder. And I was just blown away with his clarity of thought. And more than anything, just his humility and passion. We're all in our early 20s. So that kind of made me okay, this is where I want to these are the kind of people I want to be around. My seniors at Zomato, like Pankaj, Ridipya, for that matter, even Albinder, who used to head international then, they would give a lot of autonomy and very clear expectation that look, your skill set is this, and what we're asking you to do is this. If you're drowning, just ask for help at the right time. And that just gave me a lot of confidence.
You joined Google Pay. How did that happen?
But I'm very grateful for my journey in Google. It's just developing a product level of thinking and really challenging first principles. Yes, on theory this should work, but it's not. But why is that?
The idea of Robin Hood Army, how it all started, how has the journey been as of now, and where are we today?
Where we are today, like you mentioned some of the numbers, we serve around almost 2 million people every month. A big part of what we're doing is not just food, but also teaching the children of the families we're serving. So we have around 10,000 kids who we teach. Around 10,000 of them have gone to school. 7,000 of them have gone to school for the first time because of the education. In fact, one of our kids, Monal, who we got into the Robin Hood Academy 9 years back. She just got admitted to IIT, and that's been a big milestone for us.
How did Skyscanner happen for you?
So Skyscanner happened very organically, and I thought that only people who lived abroad have used Skyscanner. It was really funny. I was talking to my co-founder Arushi about Skyscanner, and I'm like, have you heard of this company called Skyscanner? She's like, what do you mean have you heard of this company? She's like, I spend more time on Skyscanner than I do with Sangwan. Sangwan's the husband, right? And I was like, okay, cool, product market fit, I'm here.
We had a lot of fun hosting Neel Ghose on the podcast today. Neel has had a fantastic journey so far. I would say rather fascinating. He was early team member at Zomato, Google Pay. Currently he's heading Skyscanner, and he has built a massive non-profit organization called Robin Hood Army. It's a non-profit organization which redistributes foods from restaurants. We covered a bunch of topics, really his early life, what shaped him most growing up, time at Zomato, his learnings, experiences, Google Pay, Howard, what made him move back to India. We went deep into Robin Hood Army and his current job at Skyscanner, how the Indian tourism is changing, the evolution of Indian travelers, and his advice to folks who are thinking about moving back to India, and who is he outside of work. Awesome, Neel. Man, excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. As I told you, I've been listening to your podcast since COVID days. So excited to be on the other side.
Yeah, definitely the episode with Mukund, who you've worked with, was one of those early ones, and he was kind enough to really, come on the podcast. And Neel, man, I've come across a lot of high functioning people, of course, because of the podcast and my investments. You have a very, very interesting background. It really stands out. Congrats on that. And why I say that is, of course, we'll be covering those parts in the podcast. But given your background in both corporate and a massive organization, non-profit organization, which is fully volunteer driven in India, which is not just in India now, it's a global phenomenon called Robin Hood Army. Maybe to get started, I would love to get to know you. What really shaped you the most while growing up, and you sort of picked up, these values and this worldview to do what you've done as of now and you're doing today.
Right. So, firstly, I don't know if I categorize myself as high functioning anymore. Maybe 5 years back, I was very high functioning and high strung. I feel like now I actively try to just think a little more and be a little measured. So that's one part. But I think I grew up in Calcutta and Bombay. Very typical upper middle class background. My family, my sister is the 4th generation academic. So my mom was the principal of a school. So I feel from a very early age, values were a big part of our upbringing and all that. And I feel like even seeing my parents and my mom, like, at a very early stage, like I realized like success is just enjoying what you do. You know, you said something very profound, like when we were catching up right now about how even if you had all the money and the fame in the world, you would do exactly what you're doing. So I feel like that was very formative at an early stage. I'm like, you really need to enjoy your everyday, irrespective of what like society prescribes. I think second part was like I think school and your friends obviously have a big impact as to who you are as a person. Um, I went to two very different schools in Calcutta and Bombay, and my school in Calcutta was an all boys Jesuit school. I feel people like students who were there were from literally all walks of life, and it didn't matter, you know, like what someone's father or parents or anyone did. Like what mattered is like how you played your sports or just generally like who you were as a person. So I feel that was very formative. I'm very very grateful for like that those experiences and that set of friends who still like kind of like carry with me like wherever we go, and everyone's doing very different things, everyone's very diverse, but that just being around successful people bit was not ingrained at all. And I feel that kind of keeps you grounded. Like you need to be around people who call out your BS all the time, and so that was great. I think my school in Bombay was very different. So that was like a more high functioning kind of place. It was a school where a lot of like industrialist families were there, and I feel like if anything there, like I got more driven to do more, or to like kind of like carve something out of my own. And yeah, so that was also slightly formative in its own way. Really enjoyed both the experiences. Outside of that, like you've obviously been a professional player, like a tennis player. I have always loved my sports and team sports. Like I've been a very avid cricket lover and cricket player. And I played football also, like in school and college. And at one point, obviously, my dream would have been to play cricket for India, but had the passion, had the hard work. Just realized I didn't have the talent. Took a while to kind of get there, but I feel like team sport is something which again like teaches you just so many values, right? Like that it's not about you, or it's like having the back of your fellow sportsman or woman or whoever you're playing with. Resilience, knowing how to lose, and really like fighting for the underdog, you know. And I feel like that part of me which wants to like help others and give back, it probably comes from sports. It stems from sports that you really want to like help people who might not have the same opportunities as you. So altogether very happy, balanced childhood. No stark experiences which have shaped who I am. But then just like a constant reminder and perspective of like success does not need to be what everyone prescribes it to be. Like, everyone will have their own unique relationship with success. And like to be self-aware of that. And that might change with time. But to keep like tuning into who you really are, I feel that's something which I was lucky to be around people who kind of like shape that at an early stage.
Got it. And Neel, you joined Zomato at a very early stage. That's back in
2011.
2011, and you were one of the early few ones. Firstly, what really convinced you to join Zomato at that time? Because in 2011, joining a startup was not really a sexy thing. And how was the journey like at Zomato? And also, would you have ever imagined Zomato would reach around $30 billion valuation as it is today?
I think I'll answer your last question first. Absolutely not. I feel like I don't think any of us were thinking about things at that scale back in the day. But I think like the honest answer why I joined, I think I'd done 2 years of experience in a company called Shaw in finance. I wanted to do my MBA. I did my CAT. It didn't work out, right? And then one of my friends, Anand, he had joined Zomato at a very early stage. And like I was hearing about his experiences. And then I met Pankaj, who's the co-founder. And I was just blown away with his clarity of thought. And more than anything, just his humility and passion. More than being impressed, I was just like jealous as to like how can someone have that much passion of what they're building, and like we're all in our early 20s. So that kind of made me like very like, okay, this is where I want to kind of like, these are the kind of people I want to be around.
Yeah.
I think early days when I joined, I was one of the first salespeople for Zomato, and I think sales is the most humbling thing one can do. So uh, any conception or preconception you might have about your pedigree or your, I think, just goes out of the drain when you do sales.
Yeah.
Because people just want to know like who you are, what your product is, what your brand is, and how it can add value to them. So I used to sell to like restaurant owners across Delhi, and my Hindi was not always fluent back in the day. So like here I'm trying to convince people, some West Delhi small restaurant owner, like A, what the internet is, B, what Zomato is, see how I can add value to their business. I feel that's the real business school, like learning that. I think with time, the organization grew, and I was lucky to kind of grow with it. So one of at an early stage, Pankaj and Dippy gave me the opportunity of building my first market, which was Calcutta, which is where my parents lived. And then again, a combination of hard work, skill, luck, kind of made that actually grow. And then for the next 3 years, my job was setting up our international markets. So I would spend around 9 to 12 months in each of these markets, building our first team, figuring out local partnerships, uh, customizing our content according to the local audience, and then also like kind of handing over to the local country manager, whoever that would be, would be my successor. And that was again a crash course of also what not to do. Because we're like folks in our mid-20s figuring it out, learning by trial. But I think like again, like my seniors at Zomato, like Pankaj, Dippy, for that matter, even Albinder, who used to head international then, they would give a lot of autonomy and very clear expectation that, look, your skill set is this, and what we're asking you to do is this. If you're like drowning, just ask for help at the right time. And that just gave me a lot of confidence. So like I remember the times when I'd tell Albinder, oh, this is the situation. What do you think I should do? He's like, what do you think you should do? And I'd say, I think we should do 0.345. He's like, fir kar le. So I feel like that at a very early stage just gave me a little bit of a confidence boost. And like that autonomy to kind of like create my own decisions, build a team, build a culture. So that was a lot of fun. It was not all smooth sailing. Some markets succeeded really well, like Portugal. Some markets didn't succeed at all, where we worked hardest, like London. A lot of learnings from that, but extremely like hands-on experience. And then the latter part of my Zomato stint was leading our large monetization teams. Right, so I used to look after like large sales teams in different parts of APAC and also India. Again, Zomato was like in that 6 years or so, we probably saw like 3 near-death experiences where we have like 2 or 3 months of runway, and if like the sales team doesn't meet their targets, then basically we're told like salaries are not there to pay. But I feel like what it really built and what I take into like any part of my life is just a lot of positive resilience. Like nothing is too big a deal. Worst case scenario, it won't work out. And you'll figure something else. And I feel like from a very early stage, people like Dipinder would really, really think very big. But with that attitude that if it doesn't work, it's fine. And I feel like I'm very, very grateful for that experience, that exposure at a very early stage, because then nothing seems too intimidating. You're like, at the most it won't work out, but at least you'll have like 5 amazing lessons from it, and like a great network of colleagues who are now like good friends. So something or the other will always work out. So I feel like when I've taken risks in my career, done something a little unconventional, not taken the like beaten path, then every time I like just go back to that philosophy, yeah, theek hai, kuch na kuch to ho hi jayega. So I feel like that was one of my bigger takeaways at Zomato, and also like making good friends. I feel like because we spent so many hours together, like building and winning and losing, that there's no point working that hard unless you're good friends with people around you. So I feel like even today, it's been like 7 years since I've left. I still refer to Zomato as we. And I still like the people I work with are good friends. And like anytime I think about like a build, whether it's Skyscanner or a Rob Nodami, like I have these folks to kind of go back to and just like bounce off.
And I also noticed Neel, that on your LinkedIn page,
Yeah.
you specifically mentioned, I think, on your Zomato, LinkedIn work, even Google Pay, that the kind of friendship you made.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Is it very natural to you, or you really prioritized that? That hey, I'm here to build deep relationship
Yeah.
with the people that I'm working with.
I think it wasn't thought through.
Yeah.
It just happened organically. I think like again, like you would relate to this, but sports has been a big
Sports.
part of your life.
Yeah.
Like the people you surround yourself, you just get to know at a deeper level.
Yeah.
And try to be authentic, don't try to be the stud who knows everything
Yeah.
in life. Just say like, yaar, mujhe nahi aata hai. And then like people like open up even more. So I feel like uh, life would be very boring here if you would just work and like not really get to know people around you. And then everyone has their own strengths. And
Yeah.
sometimes you really like at least for me, I'm lucky to have bosses who I really like as people, right? And I've seen myself stretch that extra mile, not because like it's my job description, not because of my career, but because I like them as people. And I feel that's a constant cycle.
Yeah.
Right. So like I feel even when like if there's a team I'm building, it's really important for me to get to know them on a personal level.
Yeah.
So that they know kind of who I am, what my brand is, like why are we building what we're doing, and
Yeah.
then they'll also like you work for each other rather than just work because you're getting a salary.
Yeah. Post Zomato,
Yeah.
you ended up going to Harvard
Yeah.
Business School.
Yeah.
How was the journey like?
Yeah.
And what was why did you landed up
Yeah,
at
yeah.
Harvard, and what really made you
Yeah.
to move back to India?
Yeah, so Zomato was also a lot of like I had my share of living abroad.
Yeah.
So I spent almost like 2 years, 2.5 years across uh, Portugal, across London, across Australia. I was always very clear that I loved the life there, but I'm coming back to the country. And I don't even think it was for opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm just like there's something very just deep rootedly patriotic, or not patriotic, but just like I love like the idea of India,
Yeah.
like whether it's flawed, whether it's successful or not. So I'm like, yeah, this is where home is. So I think in the back of my mind, I'm like, irrespective of what I do, I'll always see myself coming back. The MBA was an accident, right? Like that was not the plan. I think in Zomato, you're kind of like, you don't really value an MBA, like, and you don't really value the skills that come with the MBA. So, in fact, I would probably be one of those people who would shit on MBAs before joining MBA. So that was a bit of an accident. I think what happened was while building Zomato, I discovered something I was really, really passionate about. And this was 10 years back, and I'm still as passionate about it, which was the Robin Hood Army. Right? And we'll talk more about that in depth. But what I realized was with time that the Robin Hood Army was kind of like my North Star. That was what was driving a lot of my decisions. And it was growing at a pace because of people we kind of studied and work with, colleagues in Zomato or Dish or where I worked, or people who I used to study with in school or college. And because for the first time in Zomato, I had taken 2 weeks off. Right, this was during Independence Day.
Yeah.
And we did this kind of like mission in the Robin Hood Army where we kind of like mobilized a lot of like media houses and startups and organizations, and we served like I think at that point 500,000 people across India and Pakistan, right? And I felt that was probably the most the most like sense of like fulfillment I got.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I need time to kind of build this. So I think like given those two vectors, I'm like, yeah, if I need access to more people to build something, and if I want like time, that kind of like okay, like this might be the right time to go to grad school and just widen that base to build the Robin Hood Army. Really difficult decision, because I was really happy in Zomato. You know, like it was, it's like a sports team. Like you're there as long as you're contributing and you're doing well. So I would never take that for granted. But I was really happy and I made great friendships. But I was like, yeah, this like all my life in Zomato, I'm like, I'd probably leave to build my own thing. And at some point, something clicked. I'm like, this is my own thing.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, yeah, like to a certain extent, like money motivates me to the point of being comfortable. But I'm like, this is where I get that purpose, and that this is where I can really feel my creative juices. So that's how like business school happened. Like
Yeah.
that's how like I literally spoke to Dippy and Pankaj in October. I spoke to them before doing my GMAT. I'm like, listen, how I'm thinking about it. And then I did my GMAT in November, applied in December,
Yeah.
interviews happened in January. So it was very, very fast.
Quick, yeah.
And then when I was telling people, like I was telling like some folks who had hired from ISB a year back, they're like, you are going for a business school. You're the one who used to shit on like, well, like doing an
Yeah.
MBA. So I'm like, yeah, life changes, priorities change. But yeah, I think 2 years in Boston were great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was not trying to be the class topper. So I didn't spend a ridiculous amount of time on academics. I didn't spend a lot of time on recruitment. My time there was getting to know people
Mm-hmm.
and building the Robin Hood Army
Mm-hmm.
and having a good time. I think after 6 years of like building
Yeah.
Zomato, it
Yeah.
was kind of like a breather for me also.
Uh-huh.
And it was really, really good for, like I went, like it was a gut feeling that like this will be good for the Robin Hood Army. I feel like when I went there, we used to like at that point we had served around 2 million meals till date.
Mm-hmm.
Today it's around 160, and I think a lot of the partners who helped us grow were people who were alums
Mhm.
from the business school. A lot of professors took like a personal interest in like growing the Robin Hood
Yeah.
Army, and so like currently in the 12 or 13 countries we've launched, 6 or 7 of them were alums from the school.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like that was a gut feeling, but it worked out.
It worked out.
Right.
Yeah.
Learned a lot also. I felt like everyone who would go to like Harvard would be very sorted. Not at all.
Yeah.
I realized like sometimes the smarter someone might be, the more insecure they might be.
Mm-hmm.
And it really kind of taught me like perspective on how to like prioritize one's happiness.
Yeah.
Right. And again, you were around some incredible people who've done incredible things. Folks who are like US Marines,
Mm-hmm.
or people who built like unicorns before coming to business school, or people who kind of like done stuff in private equity. But I felt what I really realized is like the people I'm gravitating towards were not the people who are necessarily very successful, but irrespective of what they've done, people who are just authentic.
Yeah.
And like what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
And who are humble.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, no matter how successful someone is, like if they're not humble, it's just very weird. Like you can feel it like
Mhm.
within like 10 minutes. So I feel like that was again like very grateful to make the friends I did there. And it was a very good experience. Like I feel like I learned a fair bit. And the school's also in this evolutionary phase where like over the decades has had this very cutthroat capitalist reputation.
Uh-huh.
But now they really like challenge you that look, like success is not necessarily just doing well in your career or just wealth creation.
Yeah.
It's like wo sab to kar loge.
Yeah.
But how do you create a wider impact? Are you good enough? It's not like are you good-hearted enough to do both, but are you smart enough
Yeah.
to kind of like balance too hard? So I think I didn't expect that
Uh-huh.
when I was going there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a great force multiplier for the Robin Hood Army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. And Neel, you decided to come back.
Yeah.
And you joined Google Pay,
Mhm.
which was again very early in the journey.
Yeah.
And how did that happen?
Yeah.
And what was the experience like?
Right.
If you were to, pick, let's say, 2 or 3 skills or experiences that you picked up from Google that has really helped you.
Yeah. Right. So Google Pay, again, very different culture from Zomato,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
one's clearly a large company, one's a growing company.
Yeah.
So it was not a natural choice.
Yeah.
But I really love the idea of what they were doing with payments in India, and like the stage of the journey they were with UPI. And you could see that like when I had moved in 2020, I think that time like there were around like 30 or 40 million UPI users
Uh-huh.
at that point. Now there are 15 billion transactions a month.
Yeah.
So you could see that this is going to be something very momentous. This is going to be something very significant, not just for the startup ecosystem,
Mhm.
but across the country,
Yeah.
right? Like, and so that's something which really like the mission of it was something which really like I could resonate with.
Yeah.
And two was that again, as I said, culturally, like something which really took me along like 6 months to get used to was the decision making there, because it's a large company. So it's not like one person takes the calls and everyone just follows. Like that's what we were used to in Zomato. If you have to challenge it, but like focus on execution.
Mhm.
Here, like things were thought through like for the next 3 years,
Mhm.
and there were like probably 8 or 10 stakeholders, and everyone had to kind of have an equal buy-in. So that took me some getting used to. But what I really loved about were the people.
Mhm.
You know, like very interesting people in the team.
Yeah.
For who, like, yes, they're building something cool, but that's not the be all and end all of life.
Mhm.
So, like, let's say Sajid, who was the leader of Google Pay back then, and he moved to Hotstar after that. Very fascinating guy. Like, he was the captain of the Singapore cricket team,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
like when he was in Hindu college, he used to open the batting with Ajay Jadeja.
Yeah.
Then there was someone who was a pilot,
Yeah.
a previous McKinsey consultant, and a child actor in Hampach. Right? Like, there's just so many things to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, my manager, who I kind of like was first mapped to, he had a a Guinness Book of Records for memory. Can you imagine the luck of
Yeah.
that? Like someone, like, how can you even bullshit someone like that? So that's what I just found like very fascinating people.
The background.
Backgrounds and not just like your conventional thik hai, IIT, IIM, ye wo, all of that, but
The
just
diversity was
just a lot of like color.
Yeah.
Right. So I love that.
Yeah.
And I feel the other part, but then again, like we joined bang in the middle of COVID.
Mhm.
So it was not like I met a lot of people suddenly in 1 or 2 years. And like Sajid again would prioritize everyone meeting
Yeah.
at least once in 3 months in Goa just for fun or whatever.
Mhm.
But so I feel like that was also navigating COVID with the set of people was very interesting. The second thing which I, for the first time, really got my hands deeper into
Mhm.
was product.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like that was my first, like in Zomato, it was much more about building operations, building revenue, buildings. Like Google is obviously a product driven company, like
Yeah.
nothing, not a lot moves to product. And I think I learned as much from my failures
Mhm.
as I did from my successes.
Mhm.
So, like one project or one product which was kind of under my responsibility was something called the Spot.
Mhm.
And the Spot is basically like a micro app within Google Pay. So, like, let's say Make My Trip can have their own spot. Zomato had their own spot. So it's like any Google Pay users anyway transacting and using UPI can also order food online through Google Pay through a surface which is controlled by Zomato, but it's within the Google Pay ecosystem. So we were essentially trying to kind of build the WeChat of India, right? Now, what we realized after like 2 years of hard work was that it was just not flying at the pace we were kind of like hoping it would.
Yeah.
And not because of lack of commitment or not because of lack of strategy, but what we realized is that when WeChat started in China,
Mhm.
I think the internet was just at its inception.
Yeah.
So anyone coming into that funnel of being a first-time internet user got very used to having, like, let's say 5 or 6 different use cases in one app or a super app. While the time we launched Spot, like Geo, the real revolution had already happened. There were already like at that point probably like 500 million people online. And since data was so cheap, like they were very happy having 5 different apps for 5 different use cases. So changing that habit
Yeah.
is like a massive it's almost like it's one of the most difficult things to do.
Mhm.
But like kind of like really going deeper into the product, understanding the use cases, understanding why people would do that,
Mhm.
that took a lot of nuance, right? Like then for some reason, like fintech products on Spot were really working, like lending apps or investment apps. And then we tried to really understand why. And what we realized was that people, if you're investing in a fintech product, you have to put in a lot of personal details, like your Aadhaar, your salary slips, or whatever.
Mhm.
People were just much more comfortable doing that on Google Pay rather than on a third-party app, and that's why the funnels there were much better.
Mhm.
So I feel like they're like at least what I'm very grateful for my journey in Google is just like developing a product level of thinking
Mhm.
and at least challenging first principles. Like
Yeah.
yes, on theory this should work,
Mhm.
but it's not. But why is that?
Yeah.
And I feel like there are a lot of partnerships which came out of that, a lot of like relationships that came out of Google,
Mhm.
which we kind of kept feeding into the Robinhood army, right?
Yeah.
So I met the Zerodha folks, and then they built out this whole retention platform. We did a bunch of partnerships with Uber, and then Uber became a key strategic partner for the Robinhood army.
Yeah.
So again, like It's kind of like business school 2.0,
Yeah, yeah.
for lack of a better word.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, happy memories
Yeah,
and like a
yeah.
great time there.
As you've mentioned, North Star has always been Robin Hood Army.
Yeah, always.
And seems like the idea of Robin Hood
Yeah.
Army came during your time in Portugal.
Yeah, yeah.
And just recently, you've
Yeah.
celebrated 10th year
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Robin Hood Army.
Who would have thought?
Man, what a milestone! I think you guys are in about 20 plus countries.
13. 13.
13
Yeah.
and in 400 plus cities.
Yeah.
You've I think you've given more than 120 million meals, and you have over 2 lakh volunteers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So congrats on that.
Thank you.
Neel. Maybe with your own words, just quickly tell us how it all started.
Yeah.
How has the journey been as of now,
Yeah.
and where are we today?
Yeah. So firstly, like I think anything in the Robin Hood Army, I'd like to caveat saying that even now, all the good things or impact which happens, I'm probably not involved in 95% of it. So there are some incredible people running the different parts of the organization. So everything I share is actually like a factor of like them and me kind of by building it together. By no means was it ever a single player game, right?
Yeah.
So it started really randomly. Never like, so this was again like mid-20s. Was setting up Zomato in Portugal.
Yeah.
I think priorities were quite simple, like building my career and just like having a good time. And but what our strategy then was, we were relatively bootstrapped back then, 2014. So a lot of our marketing in Zomato was partnering with local credible organizations, right? And so then through that strategy, we came across and we partnered with this organization called ReFood, which is very, very popular in Portugal and Spain. And it's an American gentleman who went backpacking in Portugal, and he just built this.
Yeah.
And what they do, very, very simple idea. Volunteers in their free time collect extra food from restaurants and give it to the less fortunate.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, in my mind, I thought, this is obvious. Hai.
Yeah.
Like, this is not rocket science.
Yeah.
This is not like a very difficult idea to comprehend. This should happen across India. And I feel like, so when we started, it was more like a weekend project. I think Zomato then we used to work 6 days, so it was more like a Saturday nights and Sunday project, and maybe some weekday nights. But I think the more we did it, the more we realized the kind of a scale of the problem, like across the country, like of people having 2 square meals a day.
Yeah.
And then you can realize that you have to think about it less as an impact and less as a NGO kind of initiative, and more as a scale startup. And how do we use first principles to kind of build it? I think like what we realized at a very early stage was that decentralization is key. So we found some really, really like driven, smart people of different age groups and different cities to kind of like take the playbook and kind of build it. We took a call at a very early stage that we're not going to take money, right? Initially, it was more moral. It was more like, no, we'll keep it clean. People have the stigma against NGOs. But then we realized that like tens of thousands of volunteers are coming in and putting their heart and soul into it because no one's making a buck.
Yeah.
They're thinking of it as their own baby.
Yeah.
So you don't want to mess with that motivation. So even 10 years down, I realized that that's been one of our biggest levers to kind of grow the Robin Hood Army. So it's continued being zero funds. There's no money involved. And in a weird way, that has led to levered partnerships, right? Which has grown the Robin Hood Army many times over. So, for example, like any partnership either gives us more food, or they give us more visibility to kind of get more Robins involved, or they give us talent to kind of grow us. Now, the pitch is really simple. Like, suppose we're going like, and these are partners like, let's say, the ABP group who gives us free media houses, or Uber who gives us free rides, or Zerodha who gave us free talent. There's a company called TFS, which is like provides like all the restaurants you see in airports is owned by TFS. So they've been giving us millions of meals every year. The pitch is really simple, Shiva, that look, we're doing this in our free time. There's no money involved. This is our way of getting back to the country. Are you in? Like it takes a jerk to say no to that, right? And then obviously like a lot of organizations also have their own narrative building goals or their how are we helping the bigger India story goals. So it kind of like fits into like, it's not just an non-profit or a CSR thing. It's like it fits into their core business goals.
Yeah.
So that's been a big force multiplier. Where we are today, like you mentioned some of the numbers, we serve around like almost 2 million people every month. A big part of what we're doing is like not just food, but also teaching the children of the families we're serving. So we have around 10,000 kids who we teach. Around 10,000 of them have gone to school. Like 7,000 of them have gone to school for the first time because of the education impact. In fact, one of our kids, Monal, who we got into the Robin Hood Academy 9 years back, she just got admitted to IIT, and that's like been a big milestone for us.
Yeah.
I think again over the last probably the first 7 or 8 years, it's been a very leadership dependent organization. It's dependent on a few set of people who've been kind of like putting out the vision and driving all of that. And we realized that also has its limitations and bottlenecks. So what we realized is that if a few key people leave, then suddenly like the whole model is kind of like suspect to like continuation.
Yeah.
So now we've actually been spending a lot of time on building systems to kind of grow. And like for me, like a lot of that is just making myself replaceable and like thinking about the future. So I spend almost like 40-50% of my time talking to really smart people who are like incredible at product or data or tech or operations or partnerships. I think that, look, this is what I do in my free time, and it'll probably take like 10 hours of your week or 15 hours of your week. But I can assure you, you won't feel more fulfilled by anything else you do. Right? And my job is convincing these people and then just giving them a free hand to build systems. So we had some really cool people coming in and like helping us. Like recently, the long-time CTO of Zomato, Gunjan, is now kind of building out engineering for us. Kailash from Zerodha was the CTO. He built out this whole retention platform. So there's some very interesting people who've been like ambassadors of the Robin Hood Army. There's Mohit from Peak or Sequoia, who's been like a champion of the Robin Hood Army for the last 7 or 8 years, and like he just like opened the right doors for us. So I feel like the goals are very simple: get really smart people to kind of increase the impact. Go deeper into kind of enabling the families we are serving. It's not just giving meals, but meals is a trust enabler. How can we kind of like convince through these meals to get these kids into school? How can we make sure they stay through school? So I think building the Robin Hood Academy is a big focus. Our most recent initiative has been going deeper into the country. Into like, we've got this thing called Mission Swadesh, where we're like, out of those 400 cities we're in, each city should kind of like figure out how can we take responsibility of probably 5 to 7 villages in your radius of like 50 kilometers who have the maximum amount of need and make a difference like on a constant basis. So I feel those are the 2 or 3 biggest priorities. It's always been something I've kind of built with my career. In fact, not just me, like my co-founders, like they've always kind of done it like with the businesses they're building or whatever. But hopefully still early days. Like I think the only thing I'm most grateful for, and I'm telling you all the good things. There's also like when you have like tens of thousands of people, there's drama, there's politics, there's all of that. Like now, like some towns have kind of become like, because there are thousands of Robins, have become like a vote bank. Like people go there for like this thing. So we have these guardrails that look, no money involved, apolitical. It doesn't matter if you're right, left, center. You come here to serve people. I don't share my political ideology. I don't expect anyone else to do that. And like we serve all religions. So I feel like we have to keep like rethinking every 2 years what makes sense. But it's always been very purposeful. But weirdly, for the last couple of years, it's become very intellectually stimulating. You know, thinking about the next phase of growth, finding people who are just at another tangent in terms of what they built, and then convincing them why they should be part of this. But good fun, Like I feel like even 10 years in, I'm as driven to kind of like build it and do more with it.
Now let's talk about the tough parts also.
Absolutely.
Neel, what's been the biggest setback at Robin Hood Army, and what did you learn from it?
I'm actually like thinking about like the different setbacks we have, and there've been enough, right? I think one thing is like, you know, and this is, I would argue, it's anywhere. It's in Robin Hood, it's in Zomato, it's in any organization. You know, managing that friction between scaling something and protecting culture. right? I feel that is something where at different times of growing the organization, there are different priorities, but you have to keep coming back to your basics as to what matters, right? And keep your DNA intact.
Yeah.
I've seen from outside and like kind of like how Dipinder's done it in Zomato in the last 7 8 years. He still is very very particular about protecting that DNA, and so I feel like balancing that. Earlier, the Robin Hood Army used to be an organization run by young professionals, right? People who were kind of building their own startups or doing their own corporate things. So people kind of like thought the same way, or like it was very similar wavelengths. Now I'm proud to say like the Robin Hood Army has like students, it has retired citizens, it has uh, local business owners who are 50 years old, they're homemakers, every walk of life, a lot of diversity. But managing those tensions or managing that has been a big part of like kind of like growing, and like there have been a lot of like really tough conversations, right? Like, and through that we've also kind of like tried to shape our culture, like we've got this thing which says citizens first, Robins last, right? So what that means is basically if you and me are building in a city and we've got like let's say some radio interview,
Yeah.
then if we are arguing about who should go for that radio interview, then it's not a citizen's problem, it's a Robin's ego thing. So then we are setting ourselves up for mediocrity, right? So like really like mandating that and like constantly checking on people, but at the same time like setting expectation, having tough conversation, and like I'm not paying anyone to do anything. So like sometimes I also feel guilty. I'm like, do I even have the right to have a tough conversation with someone?
Yeah.
They're not kind of scaling up. But then you kind of realize that look like the organization come first. The people we're serving, they come first. So like if you have to continue this and not just rest on our laurels, like you have to be hungry. You have to keep reinventing what you do. But that's also sometimes emotionally draining.
Yeah.
Right? Like you want to be the nice person. You want to be liked by everyone.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen. I think the second part is obviously time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like all of us kind of have our own journeys. Robin Hood Army is one priority. Professional lives are a priority. Personal lives are a priority. Like like people have families. People might have got laid off. People have kids,
Yeah.
and then they have like illnesses in their family. So like managing that along with everything for everyone, bringing people along. It's not been the easiest thing, and and also because we're not paying any money. There's no money involved. So managing that personally and also for the wider team has been something which we've had to give a lot of thought to, had a lot of like made a few mistakes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like we're still like the core is very connected, and we're looking forward to what lies ahead with the Robin Hood Army.
Yeah. And look, Robin Hood Army has expanded.
Yeah.
Started off with serving meals
Yeah.
to the ones in the need.
Yeah.
And then you launched Robin Hood Academy, which is around education. Now
Yeah.
Swadesh, which is getting deeper into India. How do you evaluate and think through what to launch next? And also, building on top of this, what's the magical outcome you hold for Robin Hood Army?
I think it's very interestingly, most of these ideas have not come from me or Arushi, who's my co-founder. Like, let's say, for example, let's say Robin Hood Academy. In Indore, the Robins in their free time, they started teaching kids, right? And like lots of kids, like hundreds of kids. And like I told you, like I come from a family of academics. So initially I was very uncomfortable. I'm like, yeah, we can take the responsibility of giving food to someone at a certain time, but like education is a massive responsibility, right? Like you can't do a bit and then let go of it. And so then like we brainstormed a bit, and then Arushi kind of said that look, maybe you're looking at it as an input of teaching. Let's look at it as an outcome of how many kids can we put into school. So think of it as a career launcher. Like you use career launcher to do your MBA. So here you kind of like, our job in the Robin Hood Academy is just to make sure the kids we teach get enrolled into local government schools. Uske baad we'll do our best to make sure they're there. So that made it much more clearer. But again, the idea came from one of the teams. Similarly, like I think Swadesh, like during COVID, like we had some like really massive like large scale drives. We were like looking after, we had something called Senior Patrol, where we were looking after senior citizens across the country, making sure that they had their basic essentials on. It started from the city. So I feel that's where I love the decentralized model of the Robin Hood Army. That look, we have very clear guardrails. You can't collect money. You can't affiliate with anyone politically, and you have to serve all religions. Outside of that, you can do whatever you want. And because you give that kind of creative license to these people on the ground, they come up with amazing things. And then our job is only to think about what is scalable, how do we make a playbook, and how do we kind of share that with everyone else. But the innovation happens on the ground. And I feel like, to your point, like, what's that secret sauce? I'd say decentralization. Let people be, let them come up with their own creative juices, and like they'll show you a much better way than you would ever know, because they have a much better pulse on the ground. Like if I was to run, like, let's say, Robin Hood Army Vishakhapatnam, I would probably do a much worse job than the person who's actually running it today, because he or she has a much better pulse on what's happening. So I feel like staying out of their way, like letting them do that magic. And if I go back to my Zomato journey or Google Pay, I'm like, that's what my bosses did for me. Right? Like they just gave me that autonomy to make my own mistakes. So that culture is a very big part of like us continuously evolving, and also like being very honest about what's not working. Right? Like some things, if we like try, like let's say we tried Robin Hood Army in colleges, and we thought that this from the idea of it should just take off. And like, but then like students have very, very busy lives. With exams, with this, with that. So there's no continuity. And when you're starting a Robin Hood Army, you can't not go give the food. Right? So I think like knowing when to like shut down something is also really important in this process. And I think if you do something for the right reasons, the bigger plan always comes into place.
And Neel, how has leading Robin Hood Army helped you or changed you in a good way, both personally and professionally?
Like, I'll be very honest, and I've always maintained this, at least for the last 3-4 years. We build the Robin Hood Army for ourselves. Yes, it is serving a lot of people, but the purpose you get, the fulfillment you get, like that is beyond something else. So I'm like, every time someone says, "Oh, I'm sacrificing so much and spending so much on the Robin Hood Army," let's be real. If you don't want to do it, we don't have to do it, but we're doing it for ourselves, and it's helping a lot of people, which feels great, right? So I feel for me, like my happiest moments in the Robin Hood Army is when I'm on food drives, right? When you're out and like you're serving people, it's not just about like taking food from point A to point B, but also spending time with these folks, like getting to know them, taking selfies, playing cricket with them, making them laugh. And I feel for me, what I've realized is that like, and that's why I remember in the beginning of the this pod, you were talking about high functioning. I've seen a lot of my high functioning friends who have incredible careers, but deeply like not at peace or not happy. And then I see like a kid who doesn't know where their next meal is coming from, massive smile in their face, right? And so, mere liye to therapy hai. It's literally like, the problem I thought I had 2 hours back is not really a real problem, and we'll figure it out. So, and I feel like lakhs of Robins also think the same way or feel the same way. And when you go out and you do that, you just realize you get perspective in your problems, and not to like demean anyone's problems. Everyone has their own journeys, but it's very therapeutical. Like from a personal level. Professional level, I feel like I've sometimes had questions that, do you think that it comes in the way of the opportunities you can get? Or so I'd say like to a certain extent, maybe yes, from a time perspective. If I had to be an entrepreneur, like, or build something large, I would expect myself to work 7 days a week. So at least in the beginning, I can't do that. Right. So that kind of also kind of like gets me towards a certain kind of like things which like drive me, or things which I'm passionate about, which I can do. But I feel professionally, like what happens is like once that clarity is there, what I've tried to always be in organizations which kind of respect what the Robin Hood Army do. And if I'm doing partnerships, if I'm doing negotiations, if I'm doing deal making, if I'm doing sales, if I come into a conversation like because of the Robin Hood Army, like there won't be like, oh, like let's do whatever he says, but it'll be more like, okay, like he's not going to like completely screw us over. I feel like there's a bit of credibility which comes in, which also helps professionally. Right. So I'm like, I don't think of it like, or like I either prioritize my career or I do the Robin Hood Army. I'm like, how do we coexist? How do we kind of create that integration between both of what I do?
No, you've created a real impact, my friend. I've been a fan.
And the teams,
and of
I'm not
course-
even trying to be humble here,
of course
but I'm
the
like,
team,
it's an
yeah.
insane team, and I'm so proud of them.
Yeah.
But like it's really like gratifying
Yeah.
what they do.
Yeah. And Neel, if you were to give advice to somebody young
Yeah,
and who wants to create an impact,
yeah.
how can that person, get it off the ground?
And this could be. I feel like this. Like I think like advice is very suited to someone you kind of know
Yeah.
and respect to get your vibe. So like I'd be cautious about everyone like kind of following this. Like it has to kind of connect with them personally. But I generally think that sometimes like we shouldn't over intellectualize like the problem, or we shouldn't overthink like what are like when we started the Robin Hood Army. I remember that there were a lot of like questions which came up from like well wishers about like, oh, but look, if you give them food, will folks get dependent? And then is that really helping them? Shouldn't you give them jobs? Shouldn't the government be doing this? I'm like, हाँ वो सब तो ठीक है, but मेरे बस के क्या है? Like what can I do first? And then I kind of realized that like giving food is not just giving food, but it's also building trust. If I serve meals to someone week on week, month on month, year on year, then I can convince them to send their kids to school. In day zero, I can't go and tell them, oh, education is great, so do something great.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a slow journey, but it happens with going on the ground. It happens with just getting started. So I feel like stay out of that over intellectualization piece. Have a very like any consumer business, have a very clear, deep connection with your ultimate stakeholder, who's the consumer or the person you're serving, and then just keep iterating and figuring out what works. And sometimes what happens, I think, applies to a non-profit, applies to a business, applies to a job. You will always have your moments of self-doubt. For the first 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. Don't keep having that debate in your head every day about what you're doing. Like, give yourself some time blocks. Ki, "Theek hai, now I'm going to do this. 6 mahine ke baad, I'll think, is it making sense or not making sense?" I've seen, like, with entrepreneurs, like, that constant self-questioning is slow death. And then you can't do your everyday as strongly as you can. So I feel like even when it comes to non-profits, like, just stick to a path, keep reiterating as to what makes sense, and then once in a while think about, okay, what's the way ahead?
Yeah.
Does it make sense? Like I know you've spent a lot of time with entrepreneurs. Do you feel that that's also like you can use that in
I feel
building a company?
Neel, I think, man, it's really about just go do it.
Yeah.
Just like the culture that you saw at Zomato. Albinder said, "Achhi ye cheez ja kar le." It's literally about that, and we were discussing about Nawal Ravikant. It's not about 10,000 hours of work you're putting in. It's about 10,000 iterations.
Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't heard that Nawalism.
And this is what we've seen, or at least I've seen. Still very early in my career. But personally, for me, I think the number one indicator for success is bias towards action. Just going and doing it. Don't think too much. I've seen people who just think so much and they end up doing nothing. But yeah.
No, that's very relatable.
And so moving to your current corporate life and fun industry, which is travel.
Absolutely.
How did Skyscanner happen for you?
Yeah, so firstly, travel, as you said, is fun.
Yeah.
I think Indian travel is just about seeing its first ray of sunshine, and it's a very exciting time to be in this space. But I think what happened in Google was, at least in Google Pay, there was a slight exodus in my team. And so the person who used to lead our team, Sajid, he went and became the head of Disney in India. Then my manager after that, Pulkit, he went and became this MD of Snap in India, right? And they're not just mentors, but they're also friends. So I kind of was hearing about their journeys, why they made those moves, what's happening with consumer tech in India, how is that growing, how is the recent affluent audience kind of really engaging with these platforms. And I was waiting for my opportunity, very frankly. and I feel like I learned a lot in Google, but I think I was itching for that 0 to 1 again. So when Skyscanner happened very organically, and when that happened, I have interestingly used Skyscanner for 8 or 10 years, right? And I thought that only people who lived abroad have used Skyscanner. It was really funny. So when I was interviewing with them, I was talking to my co-founder Arushi about Skyscanner, and I'm like, "Have you heard of this company called Skyscanner?" And she's like, "What do you mean? Have you heard of this company?" She's like, "I spend more time on Skyscanner than I do with Sangram, and Sangram's a husband, right?" And I was like, "Okay, cool. Like product market fit, I'm here." Right? And then I think like what really excited me was the humility of the team. You know, like very passionate people. Like the headquartered out of Scotland, they built it out of like Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Very passionate about what they do, but this constant theme of not taking themselves so seriously, and you don't see a lot of that in tech, right?
Yeah.
So I felt a very like strong kinship to that.
Yeah.
You know, like I want to be around these people. I like the product,
Mhm.
and then I started learning about the travel industry, right?
Mhm.
And that got me damn excited,
Yeah.
right? Like just like, and we'll talk about it more, but just like what we've seen in the last 10 years in aviation and what is expected ahead.
Mhm.
I think, okay, cool, like right place, right time. This
Yeah.
might be the time to kind of like really get back to getting my hands dirty
Uh-huh.
and like figuring out how can we be a part of the story.
Yeah.
So it's been just 2 months, but it's been a
Yeah.
very educational experience so far,
Uh-huh.
and really excited to see what lies ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe talking about travel
Yeah,
a
yeah,
bit.
yeah.
You know, I was I was in Varanasi.
Yeah.
You know, last year.
Yeah.
Actually, early this year.
Yeah.
And I was at the hotel.
Yeah.
And typically, when I'm out there, I try to talk to people and just
Yeah.
learn from the locals and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that. And I asked this person who was showing me the property,
Yeah.
and he was like, "What's the biggest change that you've seen? In terms of your guest, or any trend that you've seen?" He was like, "Sir, earlier, 80% of the business
Yeah.
would come from foreigners,
Yeah.
and now it has completely flipped,
Yeah.
meaning 80% comes from Indians and
Yeah.
20% from the foreigners. What that translates into,
Yeah.
that Indians have started spending on travel.
Absolutely.
What have you seen? How the evolution is taking place, and what are you?
Right.
What are you seeing? What's going to happen
Right.
in the future?
There's a fun fact about Varanasi.
Yeah.
High level, like, and could be a guess, but like, how many people visit Goa every year? Random guess.
Yeah, in 20 lakhs, 30 lakh.
Yeah, it's a crore.
Yeah.
Right? 10 million. How many people do you think visit Varanasi every year?
More than a crore.
Yeah. Take a guess.
Dang, Sandeep.
Yeah.
Okay, wild guess, 10 crores.
8.5 crores. 85 million people go there every single year. And that just gives you like one insight into the depth of travel in India. I feel like, like in any industry, you always overestimate what can happen in a year or two, right?
Yeah.
But you severely, grossly underestimate what can happen in 10, right? And like you're seeing that in AI, there's so much hype a year back, and now people are like, oh, but is it really a thing? 10 years later, it will be a very different story.
Zomato.
Yeah, exactly. But travel, like, now if I take like a 15-year horizon, let's say from 2014 till 2029, like what are projections? Number of passengers flying, I think back then was around 60 million every year.
Mhm.
Today it's 160 million plus minus 10, projected to be 350 to 400 million in the next 5 or 6 years, right? Number of aircrafts, right? Like back in the day was probably 400
Mhm.
in 2014. Today is roughly like between 550 to 600, give or take again like 25.
Yeah.
Indigo and Air India have put their money where their mouth is, and they've made the largest aircraft order in the world, and they bought 1,200 aircraft. So we are estimated to have 2,000 to 2,500 aircrafts in action in the next 8 to 10 years.
Mhm.
And the governments put their money too on them also. Like they've invested $11 billion
Mhm.
in airports. It was, I think, 60. Oh, no, I'm getting that wrong. It was 74 in 2014.
Mhm.
Today it's around 160 or 165. Again, expected to be around 230 every corner of the country.
Oh, yeah.
Like I went, like before joining Skyscanner, I was visiting our smaller towns in Robnodami. I took a flight from Guwahati to Silchar in Assam in the middle of a week. It was a Wednesday, right? And I thought a khali flight hoga. It's packed, right? So I feel like, and I think Aditya Ghosh from Akasa is very articulate as well. Everything else is like there's a projection, there's a TAM, there's a this is where it can go. Travel is here.
Yeah.
It has already happened.
Yeah.
And all these numbers are a very, very small subset of the percentage of Indian travelers which are traveling. Like the number of people who take trains every single day is more than the number of people who fly here.
Mhm.
And anytime, like if you go on a flight, on a domestic flight, you'll see 10 people taking selfies.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? That means it's their first flight.
Yeah.
Right? Internationally or domestic. So I feel like demand is far outstripping supply right now. Indians are getting a certain percentage of India is getting more and more affluent. You're seeing premiumization across different like other consumer verticals.
Mhm.
And now I generally feel travel is the new flex. Right? Earlier it was like the house you lived in, it was the car you drove.
Mhm.
Now like where you're going in Instagram and how often you're going,
Yeah.
that is the new flex. And like
Yeah.
even Gen Z for that matter, right? Like we had some surveys, I think 54% of them are looking to travel internationally with their first flight,
Mhm.
right? So given that, like I just think it's a kind of perfect storm.
Yeah.
And for us in Skyscanner, we are a very different model from like the folks in India who've been there for years, like Make My Trip or Clear Trip or whoever else. Like we are partners, we're not competitors with them.
Mhm.
So for us, it's like it's a discovery platform where you can find the cheapest flight across airlines or partners or
Mhm.
other OTAs,
Yeah.
or and the most reliable ones, right? Like with trusted. So for us, it's more like how do we kind of create our own niche
Mhm.
in this ecosystem which is blowing up,
Yeah.
and really build something which makes sense for the Indian traveler.
Mhm.
You know, and like so still think very, very early days.
Yeah.
Very excited to see how it goes. Every day I learn something new about this industry. And yeah, I feel like it's going to be exciting what lies ahead.
Yeah, man. It's I was imagining when you were telling me about these things, what a cool job you have right now.
I think again 0 to 1, like it's always sounds more glamorous than it is.
Yeah.
Right. But no, it's a lot of learning.
Yeah.
And like being in travel, like I didn't know till 3 months back the speed at which Indians are traveling abroad. You know, I think 2 years back it was 12 million people who traveled abroad for leisure.
Mhm.
This year it's been 30 million people.
12
And
to
this
30 within
12 to 30, they're
years.
spending 3.5 more times than they were pre-COVID, $17 billion. And you can see countries responding to that. Right? Like you can see like earlier, like our passports slowly getting more and more stronger.
Yes.
Right? Like with like the Azerbaijans or the Almaties of the world kind of opening up. Even Thailand has now
Thailand
become
recently.
free. Like Schengen's become much less opaque than it used to be. You can
Yeah.
have like longer things. So I think like the world has started seeing India's soft power
Mhm.
as a traveling audience.
Yeah.
And that's also a very exciting place to be. And I think like Skyscanner being a global brand, like they have 120 million global travelers, they have networks with like different airlines and airports across the world.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of also like the value we can bring to not just local Indian travelers but also local Indian partners.
Partners. Yeah. 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 Now, India has become a very important market, both for even the global markets.
Yeah.
Right, as you said, from 15 to 30 million.
Yeah.
And there's a cultural shift, which
Absolutely.
you said, it has become a flex.
Yeah.
It has become a status thing.
Yeah.
And wait till Gen Alpha gets
Oh,
into the game. And before we get into our final part,
Yeah.
Neel, one last question. What message would you give to Indians, who are abroad
Yeah.
and thinking about moving to India and be part of the India growth story? Given you've worked at companies that have gone from 0 to 1
Yeah.
to massive scale like
Yeah.
Zomato, Google Pay,
Yeah.
and now you're gonna build Skyscanner.
Yeah.
Would love to hear from you.
Listen to 1947 Rise.
Yeah.
I think that's the simplest advice I can give them. I think they get a lot of perspective. But uh, I think there are enough uh, proponents of the India story, right? Like you hear it everywhere. And I feel like if you are in the right, around the right set of people and you're solving the right problem, coming back, there is a lot of opportunity for wealth creation and something which, like, you might be missing a bus if you're not coming back. I've seen this even amongst business school graduates. Earlier, only 10% of them would typically come back, and they were the ones with family businesses. Now, good, like 50-60% of them come back, and the more ambitious ones, right? I feel the one, like, while it's exciting, you have to be mentally prepared for it, right? And this is again, like, I feel like it might, like, the first thing you move back for might not be the golden swan.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, you have to always assume worst case scenario.
Yeah.
That, look, I'm moving back. I'm going to come to a place which is going to be much more traffic, much more pollution. Admission for my kids might be much more difficult. My first job might not work out, but do I believe enough in the story to kind of keep plugging away for the next 2-3 years till something works? Right? So I feel like that the opportunity is there for everyone to see. I don't need to articulate that.
Yeah.
Right? But, like, it might as well be happy. Like, it doesn't need to be as much a struggle as people like do when they come for the first 2-3 years.
Yeah.
So for that, having that mental model of assuming worst case scenario,
Yeah.
and then, like, some things of the worst case
Figure
scenario
it
might
out.
not happen, and then you're like, it's better than your expectation.
Yeah.
And then you keep building and keep doing it, and then, like, things will work out.
Yeah.
Right. But I feel like just de-romanticizing it
Yeah.
it could be like a happier transition.
Yeah. Got it. And Neel, man, what are you most excited about, or what's giving you the most energy
Yeah.
outside of work these days?
I think till 6 months back, it was the Indian cricket team. They were going through a good run. They
Yeah.
won the T20 World. I'm a cricket addict,
Yeah.
so I try to, like, we spoke over Pankaj, like he and a few others, we try to, like, land up for these ski matches wherever it happens. So now they're going through a rough phase, so I'm not as
Yeah.
excited about it. I feel outside of, like, let's say Skyscanner, travel, Robin Hood Army, I think very simple life. Yeah, I think been spending a lot of time playing pickleball with my wife. You were telling me that apparently Djokovic said that it's a threat to tennis.
Yeah.
It's been a good way to, like, get to meet people, make friends, all of that. So that's relatively exciting. And yeah, I feel like the other constant source of excitement in my life is my dog Dobby. No matter what, good day, bad day, ugly day, when I come back, I'm the most important person in the world.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, like, just focusing on the simple things are exciting. Yeah.
There's a saying, I think, and it refers to dogs.
Yeah.
They are the only breed who are genuinely excited to see you
Yeah.
every single time.
Yeah.
And Neel, we know you, as an operator, through somebody who's built a massive non-profit
Yeah.
organization, Robin Hood Army. What do your friends know you for?
Cricket addict.
Yeah.
Like, that's for sure. Like, everyone in my life knows how crazy I'm about that. Friends are a very, very important part of my life. This close ones. I feel like I've grown up in a small family. I didn't have any first cousins, interestingly. So my friends were my family, right? So, like, my friends know that, like, I'm not the best person to always be in touch, but if they need me, I'll take that flight and be there. right? Like that. I think that basic trust is there. Or for their big moments, I will kind of like make it happen. And luckily, most of my friends are very accepting of that part of my life. I'm not part of like their everyday life, but like we've always pick up from where we left off. So like if I have friends in different parts of India or the world, I might not be in touch with you for 2 years, but when we meet for coffee, it'll be exactly where we left off.
Very
So
nice,
that's there. And otherwise, I think they outside of the build and all, they know me as someone who doesn't take things too seriously.
Yeah. This has been a
Yeah.
recurring theme that
Yeah.
since morning.
It takes time to get there.
Yeah.
It takes time to get there. I feel like I've not always been that person.
Yeah.
But I think like that's the hack.
Yeah.
Of being happy doing whatever you're doing. And so I think that they kind of like see, and being a very lazy traveler. You know, weirdly, like I like going to places, but when I like go to a place, I like doing nothing. I like sitting on a beach all day, or reading a book, or just traveling in the local market. But very like not sightseeing or not like going to places. So I feel like people find that very surprising because I'm very high energy in other parts of my life. But when I'm traveling, I just like take it easy and switch off.
Yeah. And Neel, if you could invite 3 people for a delicious dinner, dead or alive, who would they be and why?
Big question. Cricketer for sure. For sure. So I think one very interesting person who I've read a bit on the history and like is Nelson Mandela. I don't know if you watched the sports movie called Invictus, and how he kind of used rugby to kind of like bring South Africans together. And more than anything, like he moved from this very radical person to someone who just assumed great intent, right? So I feel like would be a very fascinating person to like just talk to and get to know. And the second thing is actually quite personal. It would be my grandfather. Yeah, like we lost him, I think 10 or 12 years back. Incredible person, incredible, like self-made businessman who just prioritized doing the right thing, married against his parents' wishes, prioritized global travel. So he would just like he would just live life on his own terms. He would travel 6 months a year and work 6 months a year and earn enough money to travel for 6 months a year. So even though and he would always treat me like an adult, right? So I feel like if I could spend it like a day more, he'd be number one over Mandela. And maybe Saurav Ganguly, yeah, maybe. I think the Bengali in me has to like put that out. I feel that again, like he always been a polarizing person. But he kind of brought that pride into Indian cricket. He always brought that, look, we don't need to kind of like take shit from people who are more powerful than us, like stand up for your own right. And sometimes I think we've taken it to the other extent in terms of aggression. But I'm like, it's always like cool to see the people who kind of created that switch. I think these would be the 3 people who I'd love to like spend some time with. So who would be your 3?
My 3 would be, one. It's a tough one to pick between Nadal and Federer.
I see.
It's a really tough one.
Who is your?
It's both of them.
Oh wow! I've never heard that from someone.
It's a tough one, and it changed over time. Initially, it was Nadal, and I think it was more because Federer was winning just too much. He needed a new player. And then later on, maybe I'm just thinking right now, like as we are talking, maybe later on, as Federer was aging and he was still winning, so maybe I was leaning towards him as well. Secondly, I would say just Modi. And I keep thinking about it, Neel, given one, of course, what he has done is inspiring to the entire nation, mostly because from where he has come to where he is today. And as I said, like I keep thinking the guy is around 75, 76. Like, how is he functioning so good? And he has to make so many difficult decisions on a daily basis. I just imagine, how good of a judgment he has, how he operates, how he functions. I just want to kind of like just shadow him. and see, maybe spend a day or two with
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And then third, I would say, uh, again, it's hard between Derek Sivers.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of him.
I just heard of him. I don't know.
He's written some amazing books.
Yeah, yeah.
But I like, the best thing about him is really he thinks outside the box.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he's had a fascinating
Yeah,
life. And Naval
Naval Ravikant,
yeah.
of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So it'll be a good combination.
Yeah.
But Neel, man, it was fun.
Absolutely, man.
Thank you so much for making the time and really walking us through your incredible journey so far.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
And thank you for doing what you do. I think it's very, very important and meaningful to kind of like really like you've had a brain drain for decades. I feel like what you're doing plays its own role in kind of changing people's minds. So thank you and the team for what they do.